In many respects, we're already there. I mean, I think historians in 100 years will look back and go, the Third World War started in February 2022. There are many elements that are still a phony war. I mean, we saw that at the beginning of World War II, right? That's what we're seeing in the Western Pacific. The Middle East has been at war for some time. It's going to be at war for a long time to come, I think. Russia has made it very clear that it has aggressive designs in the Baltics and in Scandinavia, as well as against Poland and Ukraine. So we're kind of already there.
Now, we've seen North Korea and Putin confirm that North Korean troops are on the front line fighting the Ukrainians, albeit in Kursk to start with, but they'll be in the front line in Ukraine. We've seen reports of Chinese individuals being taken prisoner of war. Are we seeing a change in dynamic in the conflict in Europe, where we are getting this influence from the Southeast Asian nations coming in? And is that a worrying development?
They are. The fact that Putin is now willing to acknowledge it should worry us. If we recall, when the first reports of the North Korean troops were there, the Russians denied it, primarily because they don't want to give other countries an excuse to come in and help Ukraine defend itself. And that's been part of Putin's narrative all the way along. He doesn't want third parties intervening in the war. Well, he's chosen to have a third party come in. But he's now acknowledging it, probably because he's realised there are no third parties that have the courage to come in and help defend Ukraine. No European or American or Australian government has the moral courage to do that. So he's probably divined that we're not going to do it. And he said, well, why not acknowledge my partners? Because at the end of the day, you have this Iran, Russia, North Korea, China alignments, not an alliance, and it's a learning community. They are learning from each other. There's a grand adaptation war going on, and they feel they're winning it. I will say, however, generally countries who need help from North Korea are not doing well. It's not a sign of success that you are getting assistance from North Korea. So, if we dig a little bit more deeply, and the fact that Putin wants this peace agreement during his Mayday parade, because he can't guarantee it'll be secure, shows that, he's not that confident, and he's playing a major bluff against the governments of Europe and the United States. If just once in this war we called his bluff, we might be in a different war, but we failed to do that.
Yeah, well, I think you and I are probably alike. If we put a 152 millimeter North Korean shell into our gun, we would want the lanyard to make it go off be, at least 100, if not 150 meters long.
Yeah, probably a kilometre, I'd suggest.
Yes, and interestingly, there's reports to say that Russia is relying on, for supply of artillery ammunition, about 80% of it coming from North Korea. That does not bode well for Russia's defense industrial base. And everything that there is associated with that. But coming back into Ukraine, part of Putin's rationale behind his 30-hour ceasefire call was for the Mayday parade. Do you think the Mayday parade is a legitimate military target? And your General Budanov has only today said, I think, get your air defenders ready, or words to that effect.
It's absolutely a legitimate target. If you have large-scale military forces on parade, they're a target wherever they are. I mean, under the laws of armed conflict, it doesn't matter where they are. If they can be engaged in aggression against Ukraine, they're a legitimate target. I would love to see the Ukrainians attack a Mayday parade. I think it would be a wonderful thing to watch. I think it would be a great demonstration to the Russian people that Putin is weak. Now, the problem is it might also then have the Russian people join around Putin and give him more support. So you've got to be careful. You'd have to have that kind of calculus in mind, where it might be like the Blitz in London. It didn't weaken the resolve of the British people, it strengthened them. And we saw the steel of the British people come out during the Blitz. That's what you don't want to do by attacking a Mayday parade.
Well, it's interesting. I was asked this morning by Ukrainian television what I thought, and I said exactly as you said, it's a legitimate military target. However, I said, what if you're going to carry out an attack, do it on the build-up, the rehearsals and everything else. And whenever you've got the senior politicians and the old veterans that are there in the audience and everything else, actually, whilst it may still be legitimate, the optics of it would not be good, and therefore leave the parade itself alone. But there's plenty of forming up beforehand where you can actually disrupt the parade completely and almost make sure it never happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old story: win every battles, but lose the war. You could do it. You know, you have to win the war and win the story of the war, and this would have a profound impact on the story of the war for Ukraine if they were to do this. But fortunately, there's more than enough other Russian targets out there, including these, munitions arsenals that, as soon as the North Koreans ship 100 containers to them, the Ukrainians appear to be able to attack them pretty quickly, which is having a significant impact on Russia's operational tempo in eastern Ukraine.
So let's make an assumption. Russia realizes its operational tempo has been impacted. We get some form of ceasefire/peace agreement. What do you think it looks like that the coalition of the willing could be asked to do on the ground? And do you think that's militarily sustainable and politically sustainable?
Yeah, I think that the number one priority for Zelensky right from the start of the war. I remember talking to him in his palace in September 2022. Is close the skies. It's that air defense requirement, and that would be a really important contribution that European and other nations could make, is to defend parts, say, of Western Ukraine to allow them to push forward air defense capabilities. Now, that might be ground-based air defense, it might be fighter missions with a air-to-air role, or even just a AWACS kind of capability. So I think that would be an important role. The second one is training. Now, whether you do that in Western Ukraine or Eastern Poland is inconsequential, but bringing the training capability, say, like is it Operation Reflex that Australia contributes to in England? Yeah, putting that in Eastern Poland would cut a whole lot of travel time for these great Ukrainian soldiers that are being trained. And then I think the third element might be something in the Black Sea, the naval component, keeping the Russians out of the western part, but the Ukrainians seem to be doing a good job. And then the fourth element is boots on the ground. I think at some point we're going to have to seriously consider that, but that will take some kind of ceasefire, a very clear mandate, very clear command and control relationships with the Ukrainian military, and rules of engagement. That'll be a very complex mission, very doable, but there's a long way to go before we're able to do that. But none of these things should be off the table. Putin should know they're all on the table, and no amount of fist shaking or nuclear saber rattling from him should prevent us from planting these issues, at least.
It's interesting, but the question I think is, how sustainable is it over the longer period of time, not just militarily, and we've discussed how our militaries are not in as strong a position as they could be, but politically. And the thing I often quote is whenever the United Nations put a peacekeeping force into Cyprus after what was 1974 operations in Cyprus, it was described by the United Nations as a short-term military operation, and it's still ongoing today. Do you think we have to be prepared to commit for years, if not decades, into providing capability into Ukraine? And is this going to become de facto a new Cold War?
Well, we're already in a Cold War. We have been for some time. The China's been at war with us for at least a decade. They just have a different conception of war. Russia's been at war with us for just as long. We just didn't notice. One of the common characteristics of Western countries at the moment is our politicians are very unimpressive. By comparison to other elements of society, but by comparison to their predecessors. They focus on short term. There's no moral courage in any of them, with a few exceptions. I mean, Kaya Kallas and a couple others are exceptions to that, clearly. But we have a political class that really does not want to focus on foreign affairs, on national defence, really just wants to buy votes with domestic social issues. Until that dynamic changes, it's going to be very hard for governments to take a long-term view. But at the end of the day, I mean, even the occupation force in Japan, the UN forces in Korea were not set up to last decades, but they have. And I think that's probably what we'll end up seeing in Ukraine. We'll see something that might be set up for a few years, but will just endure for some time to come, because unfortunately, we can't just tow Russia into outer space and send it on path for the sun or something like that. They're going to be there. for a long time to come, and we need to protect against their aggression for a long time to come.
So something adaptable rather than something that suffers mission creep. And this is something that, you know, I'm aiming that comment at not just our senior generals and air marshals and admirals, but also at our politicians. Be very careful of mission creep, because that has not been good in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be a very clear mandate for the force, but it will also be a forcing function for the growth of military organisations, so we can rotate forces in and out. You know, it might be a 6 month or a 12-month rotation. We can't do the Afghanistan thing where people were changing out every 4 months. I don't think that is a successful method. You need people on the ground getting to build relationships. But it will also be a forcing function to grow the size and capacity of our military institutions, I think, not just for Ukraine, but potentially in Scandinavia, as well as the Baltic brigades that are being deployed by, UK, Canada, and Germany.
Yeah, well, we're seeing the Russian aggression moving, but you know, given the conflicts that there are around the world, and you know, this is sort of my last question, really. We've got the conflicts in the Middle East. We've got tensions brewing between India and Pakistan at the minute. Who's stirring that? We could debate separately. We've got Chinese expansionism across Southeast Asia, and with their Belt and Road initiatives globally. We've got, is the war in Ukraine just a thorn in Trump's side because he's got more worrying fish to fry? And do you think that we are potentially on a path to global conflict?
Well, I think in many respects we're already there. I mean, I think historians in 100 years will look back and go, the Third World War started in February 2022. There are many elements that are still a phony war. I mean, we saw that at the beginning of World War II, right? That's what we're seeing in the Western Pacific. The Middle East has been at war for some time. It's going to be at war for a long time to come, I think. Russia has made it very clear that it has aggressive designs in the Baltics and in Scandinavia, as well as against Poland and Ukraine. So we're kind of already there, but it's a mindset that we need to have. And it's something that our Western politicians really have to contemplate hardly, because they're going to have a different balance of domestic and foreign investment in their budgets. It's starting to turn in some, but I don't think there's widespread understanding or agreement in the political class of the need to do that.
Well, on that note, I think, General Mick, it's been a real pleasure talking to you for Frontline today.
Now, it's always a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Oh, no doubt we'll do that as soon as we possibly can. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
You've been watching Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you'd like to be amongst the first to get exclusive content, please subscribe to Times Radio membership at the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest updates on global affairs, or read about them at thetimes.com. Thank you.